Hey, good evening. I was literally
waiting for you to say something, man.
I was doing some. I was looking down and then
Yeah.
I don't know. I was distracted. Never mind. Hey, good evening. How's everyone doing?
I had to sit. You guys had that flag going. I had to sit back down.
Yes. So, hey, welcome back to another episode of the Scuttlebutt Podcast, where we sit down every Sunday evening. This is a pre-recorded show. We sit down every Sunday. Sorry, my bad. This is not pre-recorded.
It's not at all.
Hey, yeah, we sit down every Sunday and we talk to a veteran and get their life stories. And we hope to, as people are watching or listening, we hope that people are donating money, because what we do with all the money that is generated through the podcast, we started a nonprofit and we send veterans and first responders to sporting events, which brings up, when you're watching this will be Sunday evening. Tomorrow night, Monday evening, we have two Marines going to Monday Night Football in Detroit. I'm super excited for them. They were besides of themselves when they got the tickets. It's super awesome. Brad and Gunny, hope you guys have a great time. It's our pleasure to be able to do this for you guys. And if you're interested out there, if you're listening, watching, whatever, if you want to help support the cause, there will be links down in the show description where you can donate. You can jump over. There'll be links to buy this cookbook. This is the cookbook I started. My two favorite things in life are cooking and talking to veterans. So what I did is I wrote a cookbook, and inside the cookbook, you're going to get some awesome recipes. Plus, you're going to get some great quotes from past podcasters that we've had on the show. But all of it, all the money goes right to the nonprofit sending veterans to sporting events. And we appreciate your support. It's been going great so far. If you can donate $1, go ahead, and we really appreciate it. But I think that's all I got. You have anything before we get into Mr. Turp there, chat?
I was just checking out your new background and that fantail on that carrier, man. That thing.
Yeah. So I hope that's not too much. I hope it's not distracting, but I just know
it's a little because, like, dude, I'm a squirrel already, and I'm like,
you're squirreling on me.
Ooh.
So
no, it was really good.
The software that I use for podcasting, they came up with a new feature where you can actually have a video playing in the background instead of a static image. So I went out and grabbed a video of the fleet sailing the world, and I put that back there. So
what amphib group is that?
So I don't know. It's the be honest with you, I just grabbed it last night and put it together real quick, but I'll find out for you.
Yeah, no, because when I was when I was aboard a Navy ship, not when I was in the Navy, we were in amphib group 6. So we had destroyer, we had an LHD, an LHD-3, an LSD. We had a submarine out in front. It was pretty cool doing gator squares in the med. It was pretty cool.
Yes, it is pretty cool. It's pretty amazing to watch.
I don't really have anything. I got one thing. November 4th is the Veterans Day Parade. If you're in Murfreesboro, the Veterans Day Parade will be at 9 o'clock at the VA, Alvin C. York in Murfreesboro, Tennessee.
Yes. So, hey, that's a great point. Veterans Day is right around the corner. So make sure you get out and you see somebody wearing a hat or a shirt. Make sure you thank them for their service.
And it's my birthday on the 7th. And it's the Marine Corps birthday on the 10th. So
nobody cares about that. Nobody cares about that.
Really? Seriously? Really? Have you seen Facebook recently?
Yeah.
Because it's like every other thing is like, 248 years.
Yeah. Marines are way over the top, man. It's like, oh my God, yes, we know it's your birthday. Cool. Carry on.
Not like you do that with the Carl Vincent. Tell me I'm a liar.
You're a liar.
Yeah, right. Sorry. Hey, I love your ship too. I never went on a big carrier, but
I love aircraft carriers. That's why I'm super excited to sit down with Mr. Turp tonight, because this show is going to be awesome.
Yes.
So a couple weeks ago, I reached out to a F-14 group on Facebook and said, put it out there. Hey, if there's any pilots or RIOs that are interested in telling their story, please reach out. Turp's wife reached out and said, hey, I think my husband would be interested. And I was like, hell yes, let's get this going. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Mr. Turp. So, sir, I just want to let you know you're our very first F-14 pilot on the show. We've had F-18s, 2 F-18 pilots, a U-2 pilot, and I think that's it.
That's it. Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
So you're our 4th pilot. And I appreciate it because back in my day, the Tomcat was the plane of all planes. You know, it was a beautiful plane watching it take off a carrier. So I can't wait to hear your stories.
Well, it was an honor for you to ask me, number one. Number two is I'm an old Tomcat pilot. I was introduced to the Tomcat pilot back in 1975. I was fortunate enough to be one of 2, let's say, ensigns out of the advanced jet training to be selected to fly the F-14. And we were selected because we were top of our class, but also to make sure that it was available for other people out of the pipeline to fly it. So we were the prototype to fly it. If we succeeded, then they would start allowing more of the advanced jet people out of training command to come in and fly it. So it was an honor. And I think a lot of things that happened in my life has all been, it's all been someone looking over me. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
When I give you a background a little bit, my brother was born in 46, went through high school in 64, went to college, and I was drafted immediately. And fortunately, they didn't take me because my brother was already in Vietnam. And due to the World War II situation where you only had one brother and no other family members, that they weren't allowed to take me as a veteran. I mean, as a new recruit for the military. So I was fortunate to finish college, and I think my brother may have saved my life. I was fortunate to finish college, and then I went to teach school at an Air Force base, which I was not an Air Force person. But then about 4 years into it, going into my 4th year, I ended up picking up a young kid that had problems in school, and their parents allowed me to mentor them during the summer. And I finally decided that he wanted to not go back to school. So I said, you got the military. So I got the Army, the Marines, the Navy to come out and visit with us, and he decided to go with the Navy. So I took him in to be signed up. And when I was waiting, AOCS, Aviation Officer Candidate School, one of the gentlemen come down and said, you thought about being interested in it? I said, well, I don't know. So he says, once you take the test and if everything goes fine, we'll get you a class so you don't have to make a decision until that specific time comes up. I said, well, man, I'm making big money. I'm making almost $5,000 a year teaching, which was not much back then in about 1972. And he said, well, even if you don't make the pilot program, you're going to make a heck of a lot more as an officer in the enlisted program. So I went ahead and decided to do that. And if it wasn't for me mentoring a young kid to go into the Navy, I would have never even thought about the Navy.
Yeah,
so in 72, I went into the Navy. Yes, go ahead.
I was just curious. Had you ever flown an airplane before?
No.
As a civilian, like a little Cessna or anything? You hadn't?
Well, I think I flew one time. My dad was, we didn't have a lot of money, let's put it that way. And thank God I had a scholarship for school, or I probably would never be able to go to college. But I think I may have flown one time back in the early 60s. Other than that, but I was an athlete, so I had a lot of physical ability. I also enjoyed architect and mechanical drafting, so I had very good spatial orientation. So I took the test, passed it without a problem. You got to remember, I was 25. 25 was a cutoff date for pilots. If you're over 25, you couldn't be a pilot. So I went to Pensacola, went through their program. Unfortunately, I had an accident. I separated my shoulder playing football. And so they kept me back a class. Now, this is all going to come to fruition in a minute. They kept me back a class for about 3 weeks to a month. Then I finished that, went to basic prop. I was fortunate enough to finish that. And then I had to select where I wanted to go because I was number 2 in the class. And I said, well, I want to go to jets. So I went to Kingsville, Texas, flew the T2 and the A4. Now, when I graduated from Kingsville, the A4, let's put it that way, that was the first time they opened up the F-14 program. Before that, they never had it open. So all those situations that brought me into the F-14, something was looking over me, because if I was 2 weeks or 3 weeks earlier, it would never have happened. And if I was a week later, that would have never happened. So I was very fortunate with Dale Snodgrass and myself were designated to go to Miramar to fly the F-14. After that, it pretty much, I was in squadron called the Pukin Dogs, and Dale went to the Ghost Riders 142.
Nice.
And as we graduated, we both were stationed in Virginia Beach, Virginia. And that's pretty much where I went at that point. After a couple of cruises, then at that point I went back and being an instructor at Virginia Beach, and then went to VF-11 and as a safety officer.
Wow.
So that's it in a nutshell, guys.
Yeah. So how'd they get the name Pukin Dogs? Because that's a great name for a squadron.
Well, the Pukin Dogs were around in for a long time in World War II. Okay. I have a sample of it right here. Is one of my coffee cups. You can see that it's a dog with the wings on it.
Yeah.
Or on the top of it. And unfortunately, again, we don't want to get in politics, but somewhere along the line, they told them that we couldn't use the Pukin Dogs because it was politically incorrect. So they went back to the dogs, and then finally, 8 years later, the commanding officer said, bullshit, I'm going to go ahead and we're going back to the Pukin Dogs.
Amen. Good.
Yes. So after you got out of the Navy, did you still fly? Did you get into aviation after the military? All right.
Well, when you're flying a Ferrari, okay, it's awful hard to go back to a Volkswagen. And you got to realize the F-14 is a fighter. It's not a transport airplane. Number 2, our normal hours of operation, if you're airborne, is 1 hour and 45 minutes. So you don't build up a lot of time. Even after, let's say, 5 years of flying it, I barely got, which I have a plaque on it, 1,000 hours of the F-14. Well, some of these guys that fly transport will have 1,000 hours in 1.5 years or 2 years, because they'll be up to 6 to 8 hours at a time. So most of the pilots you see out there, unfortunately, and it's not fortunately, because they're good pilots, they usually come from cargo or from the military that had big airplanes that flew for a long time. But in general, the most dangerous part of any operation is takeoffs and landings. The rest of it is pretty much computerized.
Hey, Dwayne.
Yeah.
Did you get your name put onto the side of your plane, like Turp?
Oh wow,
or
that's a
Lieutenant
really
Commander?
funny story. Okay.
Because
Well,
somebody is writing me and asking
always-
me to ask you questions.
That's fine. Yes, I did have my name put on. The thing is that as you get more and more senior within the squadron, more and more options available to you. As an ensign or a JG, you're not senior enough because you only have maybe 14 or 15 Tomcats. Well, you got to have the XO, the CO. You got to have the CAG officer, carrier group commander's name on it. Mm-hmm. Then you got to have the lieutenant commander's name on it. So by the time it gets down to the lower ranks, almost 90% of the airplanes are already named out. So there was a cruise going down, a friendship cruise going down to Brazil, which I was very fortunate to Rio de Janeiro. And I really enjoyed that. But on the way down there, they say, "Oh, guess what? you finally become senior enough as a lieutenant. We're going to put your name on it." I said, "Oh God, I can't wait to get to port, and have my name there, and me have a picture of it." Okay. Well, 3 days out, we never fly our own airplane. We fly whatever airplane's available. It's not like you own an airplane. You just rent it for a while. So I was flying as somebody else was flying. I landed, it's not a problem. And pretty soon it got nighttime and we had a ramp strike. I don't want to say who the pilot was, but he survived. The Rio survived. Oh, guess what airplane hit the ramp? My airplane. Yeah. Damn. I never did get my name back on the airplane. Oh, so man. I did have it for a couple of days. I should have taken a picture of it, but it's now in the bottom of the South Atlantic. Oh, man. Damn. That sucks. Other than that, it was fine. Hey, so now real quick thing for you. Yes. Yeah. No, go ahead. No, I'm just saying, when I flew the F-14, it wasn't the most advanced one at that time because you have the Super Tomcat that came on later on. The F-14 I had was the F-14A. It was such a new airplane. I have a NATOPS next to me that if I opened it up, they told us every time you took off, this may be what we think is going to happen, but if it doesn't happen, come back and tell us. So I could open up my NATOPS now right next to me, and there'd be flip things in here that we had to paste on because they kept updating the F-14 of what's going to happen. That's how young it was. So every time we took off, we had to test certain things out. If it didn't come out the way it should be, we came back and write a report up, and then they sent us a sticker to put on it, and we put tape on it and said, okay, no, this is not how it works. This is the way it should work. So it's the F-14 NATOPS I've got is pretty old, and it's really neat because it's got a lot of adjustments to it. Yes, sir.
Hey,
yeah, go Turp Chaplain.
Top speed for the F-14.
Yeah.
Yeah, we're getting into the good stuff now.
Yeah. How fast you get that bad boy going?
Well, it was designed to work at 2.4 or 2.5. It had to reach those parameters before it was accepted. Okay.
Wow.
But that's when it was clean. By the time we normally flew the F-14, we had two Sparrows and two Sidewinders most of the time on it.
Yeah.
Because anytime you add attachments to an airplane, you got drag. So you had limits. Eventually, when you're aboard a carrier, which I was aboard the America and the Kennedy, a lot of times we'd fly with one or two Phoenix missiles, which is the AIM-54, which is pretty darn heavy. So we still had limits. So I'd probably say 1.8, 1.9 was probably the max it would do.
Damn.
Under those
pretty fast
stresses.
Wow.
You don't notice it at that altitude. The only thing you notice is that when you're on a TACAN, if you know what a TACAN is, a TACAN is a directional finder from the area you're going to or going away from. If you put the TACAN on your nose, so you're going straight to it, it tells you the distance you're from it. Well, I've gone 1.6 before, and if you're looking at about 1,000 knots, you can imagine how many miles that thing clicks off pretty quickly when you're heading inbound.
Yeah.
But normally you're flying at 35 to 40,000 feet. So there's not much reference out there but clouds.
Holy moly,
Yeah.
that's fast.
So
Wow.
Yeah.
when you're on the carrier, you're on the deck of the carrier and you're hooked to the catapult. The JBD is up, and you got that bad boy in full afterburner, just waiting for that thing to launch. What's that like sitting there in full afterburner? You're not moving yet. Can you feel that thing? Like, can you feel the power underneath you?
Well, the F-14 had a different setup than some of the newer airplanes or the older ones. We had a launch bar that we went down with, and there was also a holdback. When you go to the afterburner, on your console in front of you, the cockpit will go 1 through 5, and that's your afterburner stages. They have 5 stages with it. The only thing you notice is you get a pretty high rumble in your head, and you do get a little vibration from the feedback. The biggest jolt you get is when you kneel the airplane to hook up your launch bar. There's still about 4 inches still to compress. So when the launch bar is launched, your head goes forward, and within a matter of a millisecond, your head is thrown back because you get that downward, and then you have that acceleration off that part with it. So you got to understand that that's going to happen, and you sort of tighten up a little bit. The funny part of it all is that after we fly the F-14, next thing you know, the F-18 comes along, and you don't even touch the stick. You got a grip up on the top you hold on to, and you're launched without your hand on the stick. Someone's got to have an awful big set of you got to have a big set of something between your legs for me to not hang on to my stick. I'll tell you that right now.
So,
dude,
do you remember the very first time? Yeah.
Okay, what are you talking about?
I was just saying.
The first time.
Do you remember the very first time you were launched off a carrier?
Yeah, believe it or not, it was back in Kingsville, Texas. The T2, the trainer, we had to land aboard a carrier, and believe it or not, it was the old Lexington straight deck. So we did 2 or 3 touch and goes, and then we landed, and then we went right up to the catapult, and we were launched off. To be honest with you, I think the catapult launch is more exciting than any trap I've ever had, or carrier landing.
Yeah.
Because it is an exciting experience to be thrown at that speed off the front in such a short period of time. Thank goodness it's not like the old World War II where you drop below the deck and then you hope the guy flies out of it. Most of the time, you're level with the deck when you take off and you climb.
Wow.
Unless you get a cold cat. I have never seen one of those before.
Yeah. Do you remember what?
But there's other experiences,
Yeah.
There's other experiences that day landing is pretty, uneventful. Night landing, it's a little different.
Yeah.
Night landing, I remember the first time I went out at night because we did that off of Miramar for the F-14. I can't remember. I landed on 6 different carriers, but I can't remember that carrier because sometimes they put down, you had so many traps if they didn't tell you what aircraft carrier you landed on. So we went out there, and unfortunately, they had a lot of people that couldn't land on it because of the weather was so severe. And the deck was pitching, so you had to listen to your LSO. You 1 minute the ball's off the top, next minute the ball's off the bottom, and he keeps saying, keep coming. And it's a little, nerve ending saying, hold it here. I can see the bottom and I can see the top. So what do I do? So you have to believe in your LSO, landing signal officer.
Yeah.
So I was fortunate enough to do 2 touch and goes and landed. And I was one of about 8 guys that never made it. I mean, I made it. The other 8 guys didn't. And I don't know if it was a luck of whatever it was, but I just believed in the LSO and just flew it. The hard part you have landing aboard a carrier is that you have 3 things you have to think about the whole time on approach. I don't care if it's day or night. That's lineup, angle of attack, and the meatball, which is your lens. And you got to think
meatball.
those three things all the time. Where's my
Why do you guys
lineup?
call it
Where's my angle of attack? Pardon?
Why do you call it a meatball?
Well, the meatball is the Ferenz lens. It's a T, you know, it's a basic T. So if it's right in the middle of the T, it's yellow. We call that the meatball. If it goes above it, it stays yellow. But if it goes too far below, it turns red. Okay? So it's telling you the angle of attack you're approaching to make sure you land within the limits of the cross-deck pennants, you know, the wire.
Okay.
So your ideal position is to have the correct angle of attack, the correct lineup, and the meatball in the middle, or the lens right in the center of the T. With that, you've got the best chance to land.
I love him saying meatball. It's very humorous. I
cool.
love it.
So is the meatball and the ball the same thing?
Call the ball.
Call the ball. That's the same thing.
I call it the meatball because
okay.
I've always called it the meatball because if I make a good landing, I got something to eat that night. You know what I mean?
Now I get it.
Yeah. So I hear that like if you bolter, you miss the wire, you get picked on pretty good.
Well, there's times you got to remember, you know, you got 4 wires, 1 through 4, but it is rare, literally rare. You have all 4 wires. You may have the 1 wire and the 3 wire. You may have the 2 wire and the 4 wire. You know, they don't set up 4 wires all the time. And also you could hit that baby right in the middle and your damper for the tail hook might bounce. So it might bounce over a wire and it's a bolter. Yes, that's a bolter. Doesn't mean you didn't have a good pass with it. The bad part is where the LSO waves you off. And he can do it both verbally over your comm, or the Ferrell lens or the meatball will flash red. The whole thing will flash red. And we'll tell you, get the hell off the deck. You know, we either have a foul deck or your angle and approach is so far out of norm that you're not gonna make it.
So you see all red, you just give it full gas.
Yeah, you just full gas. Just don't raise your nose up. If you're over the deck and realize that all of a sudden you're there, you don't want to raise your nose up and drop your hook any lower. You just want to just fly normal and get off there.
I gotcha. Yeah. So I noticed like before the planes landed, they always broke past the carrier and did a big loop and came around, and then they landed. What's that all about?
Well, it's designed to set up. The only time you do a direct landing is at nighttime, 90% of the time. Okay, you're set up at night, 1,000 feet back, or let's say a mile back, and 1,000, let's say 4,000 feet. The next guy is a mile further back at 5,000 feet. They're just stair tacked up. Okay, I'll get into night landing in a minute. Day landing, you come in, and a lot of times you will come in more than one airplane, so you have to create separation. You usually go out in what you call combat with 2 pilots, 2 airplanes. One will come in and brake. The other one will extend a little bit, then brake and drop down to maybe 800 feet, drop his flaps, drop his gear, drop his hook. Sometimes your hook will be dropped before you even get there. That's normal. And then your speed brakes come out to slow you down. You come around the corner at about 2,000 feet, you start picking up the ball. And then you're back into the 3 things: lineup, angle of attack, and meatball. And the LSO will, years ago was flags they would hold. Now it's all comm. They talk to you over the communication. And the next guy should have an interval of a couple of minutes because they need to clear the aircraft, pull the wire back, taxi him out of the way, make the deck as clear, and the next guy lands. It's one heck of an operation. I had nothing but nothing but pride over the aircraft carrier crew pertaining to the shipboard people who handled all this. I mean, it is amazing if you're ever aboard a carrier during flight ops, how they can effectively, efficiently land you, taxi you, park you, get you the hell out of the way for the next airplane. I mean, it's amazing.
It's like 30 seconds. Yeah, the crazy thing is, man, there's 5,000 people on that ship, and every single one of them has a job, and they're always busy. It's nuts.
Except for the Marines when we're aboard.
Yeah, whatever.
We don't really do that much.
No, it's just, you know.
You guys take us. You guys take us where we got to go fight. Just kidding.
Well,
He's speechless.
Yeah, you got him flustered.
Well, the problem you have launch, you know, I may be on a launch 15, I may be on a launch 30, where you have to be ready because you're playing games. And you're on a carrier, and these guys are running around with the E2 props, with the jets, you know, taxiing around, going to the JBDs, the dead blast deflectors. Ordnance people are putting ordnance on airplanes. The fuel guys are fueling it. Everyone else is getting ready. And that, I mean, there's not like one person out there. There's 50 people out on that deck running around. And like I say, they're a bunch of organized ants.
Correct. Yeah, for safety stand downs, they show the what happened on the USS Forstall over and over again. So I watched that hundreds of times, and to see something like that go down, man, it's just heartbreaking. And these guys, when the shit goes bad, man, they just jump in it, man. They go right towards the fire. They run into the fire to do what they got to do, and it's amazing, man. My hat is off to every single sailor out there, man. It's crazy.
Hey, Turp.
Well, you got an 18-year-old kid.
Yeah.
What about the weapon systems on the F-14 versus what they used in World War II? What are the differences?
Oh, it's day and night. I mean, you got to understand, World War II had props most of the time. They did start get the ensign killer, a few airplanes in that spot with it. Their radar system was not very well done, so you really had trouble tracking. You had the A4 in that, you know, in Vietnam, which was different. Was much later, but World War II it's a day and night. Now, even today, the F-14 had the Phoenix missile, and that was designed for over the horizon area. It could fire up to 5 missiles at one time during track while scan, and at 10 miles, these 5 missiles would go active with their own radar and track their own airplane. Well, you know, their targets. Okay, they didn't have that back then. They didn't have Doppler. They didn't have single target track. They didn't have a lot of the things that the advanced airplanes do nowadays, or even the F-14. The F-14 was designed for the Phoenix missile. And the Phoenix missile was a heck of a deterrent because back then Russia was still developing a surface-to-surface missiles. And I don't want to get into that. I don't know if it's still top secret, or if it's, you know, whatever it is. But I went to Top Scope School in Miramar to learn how to intercept all these different missiles because they were concerned about the carrier air group because they flew pretty darn fast. So you had to learn how the Phoenix could intercept them. You couldn't intercept them with guns or a Sparrow. They're flying too fast with it. But in general, I was fortunate that we only had, the only thing I was involved with was the evacuation of Lebanon, which wasn't much of an evacuation, to be honest with you. The carrier was there, but they got the guys out.
So,
but the weapon system is far more advanced. The only thing that's still there is the machine guns or the Gatling gun aboard an airplane.
Did they let you fire off any of these weapons just for practice? Like, how does that go down?
Well, yes, they did. What they'd put up is a drone, and each squadron was allocated either a sidewinder or a Sparrow. Most of the time, they're sidewinders. For those that don't know, a sidewinder is a heat-seeking missile. So it needs a heat, usually the exhaust of something. A Sparrow is a Doppler. It uses velocity. It's usually a head-on missile. So it does it that way. A lot of the missiles that we were allowed to shoot were sidewinders. So they'd put up a drone, make it run in circles, and you'd get in a tone. And the word was called Fox 2. Fox 2 said you'd fired a Sparrow, a sidewinder. And at that time, of course, a drone can turn so fast, it's amazing. So by the time the sidewinder acquired it, because you'll get a buzzing sound in your ear, like it'll tell you it's on the heat. You fire it, you say, Fox 2, and within a matter of 2 or 3 seconds, that drone is turned so fast that you break lock. They don't want you to shoot it down. It costs too much. So
Right.
at least you can track it. Yeah. So there wasn't a lot. I don't remember of any squadron ever shooting a Phoenix. So, your targets are limited. They don't want to set up a drone or a unmanned aircraft for you to shoot out of the sky. It costs too much.
Right. Yeah. So you guys had drones back then?
Not the drones we know of now.
Yeah.
Not the drones that could carry weapons.
Right. Yeah.
It was just a drone airplane of some type.
Yeah. It's still
they have plenty of those.
craft,
Yeah.
man. So what's it like breaking the sound barrier? Can you feel it? Do you know that you're breaking it? Can you hear the explosion?
No. Breaking the sound barrier is usually a situation that's going to happen at different altitudes because the air density, you may have to fly 600 and some odd knots pretty much at the surface to break the sound barrier. But when you get higher, because of air density, you can break it at maybe 550 knots if you're at 40,000 feet. Okay. You can be 660 knots, but it doesn't take a lot of fuel to get there. You follow me? Air density creates friction. So the F-14 was designed, as you know, for the wings to sweep. They're at 23 degrees when you take off. And then as you accelerate, the central air data computer would then program it based on your airspeed, angle of attack, and it would program the wings back for the most efficient aerodynamics of the airplane. And it would go all the way back to 64 degrees. Okay. 64 degrees as you approached about 0.8. And then about 0.9, you had what you call canards that came out just in front of the pilot. And they're just little wings that came out alongside of the airplane that stabilized the vertical part of the front of the airplane because all of the airflow was in the rear part. And I never felt anything. Like I said, anytime, maybe you don't realize speed is life in a fighting area. If you don't enter practice and or a fight less than 1.3, 1.4 Mach, your chances of living is not very good because by the time you turn and engage, you've already reduced your speed almost down to Mach, if not below it. So you got to come in hot and fast and try to create the angles. As you start to make those angles, your wings will program because your angle of attack changes. And so your turn radius increases or decreases. Okay. But as soon as you get below, let's say 400 knots, you better think about getting speed again because you're vulnerable for an airplane that doesn't fly as fast as you do, but may be able to turn quicker. So speed is life. Get in there, try to get your shot, and then get some speed again, and then come back and re-engage again. So the F-14 was called the Turkey. You ever heard of that?
I never heard it called a turkey.
I did
And
once.
the reason it
Yeah.
was called a turkey, no, it was called a turkey because if you look at a cross section of an airplane, and all of a sudden the airplane turns and all of a sudden the wings are out and the whole thing, you can imagine 64 feet by 64 feet. How big of a door would you look at? It's huge.
Yeah.
So they used to call it the turkey because when the wings are full out and everything else, it was such a huge platform to look at. Anyone could see it.
Right.
But yet you get an A5 for the Air Force, it probably had 3 meters of surface. We had 10 meters of surface. So if your wings start to come out, everybody from God nature was going to be able to see you. So that's one of the reasons you want to keep your speed up, to keep your profile down. Okay. But the wings were designed that as the wings moved back, the Sparrow, the Phoenix, and the Sidewinder still had a forward looking capability because it was mounted on the inside of the wings that don't, go back and forth.
Man, I'm going to watch Top Gun and Top
But
Gun
I don't know.
just because of this conversation. Wow. I'm very impressed, Turp. That's very cool.
So
Yeah, well, the sad part was I ran the F-14 in the early 70s.
Yeah.
Because Grumman needed money. All right. We tried to sell the F-14 up in Canada, and I was up there in an air show with them, and I still have the Canadian F-14 on my jacket because we're trying to sell it to different nations to keep the cost down. At that time, it sounds like very much, was $15 to $20 million a copy. Now you're looking at airplanes of $30, $40, $50 million a copy.
Yeah. Yep.
But it's all relevant to what the cost of living is back then.
Correct. Yep.
But unfortunately, Iran got it, and all of a sudden the Shiites took over, and they finally had to disable 90% of them, and they decided, well, we don't want to have anything around. So if they ever got them back capable of firing, would be in trouble. So unfortunately, there's no air shows out there with the F-14 in it.
Right.
Damn.
So how I know that you got out of the Navy kind of early because you wanted to be with your family, but how hard was that decision knowing that you're never going to fly this plane again?
Well, everyone goes through a situation when they make a job change. I don't care, or you start a new business. You have to look at more things other than just yourself. I looked at things before I ever decided to leave. Now, I have nothing but admiration for anyone that goes 20, 25, 30 years or finish and retire. Okay, I do. These people really paid the price. It's not easy being in the military. I don't care what branch you are. You're away from your family. You're not looked at a lot of times in a good light because of how the society looks at you. After Vietnam, my God, my brother couldn't even wear a uniform. My wife, again, was in the military, and she had her uniform on. She thought they was a stewardess instead of an officer. I mean, I never even could stand up and celebrate our national anthem until my kids at that time was probably 1990, where they finally started to play the different service song and clapped. Before that, we didn't have any patriotism. I mean, it was really tough on everybody, okay? Mm-hmm. So in 1981, when I left, by 1980, I was starting to look at the other commanding officers, my superiors, the commanders, the lieutenant, not just lieutenant commanders, but the commanders who was the squadron, XO and CO. Next thing I know, I realized they didn't know their kids. They were gone all the time.
Yep.
They didn't have a family life. They had 5 different homes they had to stay in over their career. They had to move 5 different times. Now, that's awful hard on a kid growing up in schools and everything else. You know, their wife stood by them. Don't get me wrong. It was good. But it's like, how can you miss your kids growing up? You understand? And I did for 3 years. I missed my kids, all 3 or 2 of them growing up. I mean, I didn't see them do a lot of stuff. I wasn't part of their family. And then you come back and all of a sudden you're pulling the pants on where you gave your pants to your wife and she doesn't want to give them up because she's enjoying her life too.
Right.
And then mom said, I can do this, but now you're the dad. So, I mean, it was a conflict. So I had to make a decision. Do I want to continue with a career or did I want to be a part of a family? And I said, you know, I don't think I'd have a family, be honest with you, if I stayed in, because I was going right back. I was already in a buildup aboard the Kennedy in VF-11 as the safety officer. And I said, you know, I'm back to sea again for 2.5 years. And I have a new baby coming on. And next thing I know, I won't even see it being born.
Yeah.
I said, you know, that's not for me. You know, they don't pay you enough to go to do that. I'm sorry. They just don't.
Yes.
So that's the reason I made the decision that not just for my thing, I just looked at the future.
Yeah, that's the same exact reason why I got out of the Navy, because I didn't have I made it a point to not to have a girlfriend or anything while I was in, because it's just not fair for you or her. And so I did my 1 term, and I was like, they tried to talk me into staying. I was like, no, I'm going to go to school, and I really wanted to start a family. I'm like, this is definitely not, it's not a life for a family. So that's the reason why I got out. But I didn't have a cool ass job like you. So I don't know if I just figured it'd be a little bit harder to walk away from such a cool job.
Hey, Dwayne, your job is really cool.
Well,
I got out. I did.
No, hold on for a minute.
Yes.
It's a job. Okay.
Yeah.
You served your country. It's a job. It's no different than any other job. So I'm very patriotic. I don't want to even go to that point of my patriotism, but I'm telling you this right now. If you're not having fun in your job, it's work.
Yeah.
And if it's work and you're not enjoying work, you shouldn't be in your profession.
Yes.
Well,
if
Dwayne,
you're thinking more of something else versus doing your job, go ahead.
Well, Dwayne, I was an infantry machine gunner, and I had 3 years of hell and Fallujah and Ramadi, and then my last deployment was a Navy ship. That job that I had, it was great. I loved it, but I'm glad I got out because I've got a really nice life now. I'd be a first sergeant right now if I'd stayed in, or I'd be a sergeant major right now. I'd be like 2 years from retirement. I'm very patriotic myself, but I did 3 deployments and I saw a lot of death. I saw a lot of destruction. I caused a lot of shit. And I just thought it was time for me to move on to something else in my life. But I wouldn't give it up. I'd do it. I'd do it again in a heartbeat.
Yes.
Well, when I'm in my 20s and 30s, my life is a little different than I'm in my 60s and 70s. Okay.
Right.
I mean, I wish I could do some of the things I could do back then. All right. But at the same point is that I find that the patriotism should come from your family. You're not going to learn it in the schools. You're not going to learn it any other place. It's got to come from your family setting the rules. Any enlisted and or warrant officers, chief, petty officers, I don't know who they are. If you've served your country, don't ever tell me you can't go out and succeed in civilian life, because they taught you. If it wasn't for the Navy, I wouldn't be half the person I am right now. Nothing, not even half. They taught me to be the pilot in command. They taught me that I can work more than 8 hours and still survive. They taught me I don't have to eat every day at a certain time, and I don't have to go to bed at a certain time every day. If I want to accomplish something, put your brain to it, and you can accomplish it. These young people
Dwayne,
today, and a lot of them, and let me finish. These enlisted guys and everything else who come out and say, woe is me. Damn it, you guys have got, these people have more ability than half the civilian side you're competing against. You know what it's like to get up at 4 o'clock, and you know what it's like to work 17, 18 hours and accomplish something. Civilian life doesn't know how to do that. I'm sorry. 90% of them don't. So you enlisted guys that come and cry on my shoulder, don't do it, because you guys have already paid the price, and you've got the ability to be whoever you want to be.
100%, man. The Navy opened up so many doors for me. Like it's unbelievable. But when people thank me for my service, I'm always like, I feel like I should be thanking you to allow me to serve my country. I loved it. I loved everything about it.
Now, granted, those are very good points. But granted, some of these guys, they come back really, really messed up. PTSD, TBI. They're hyper vigilant, hyper anxious. They're beating up their girlfriends. You know, I mean, some of these infantry guys that I know, they want to work. They want to do that. But you know what? They're scared, or they can't do it, or physically and mentally they're just not there. It's just kind of you can't pile all of them into the young people. They're some ones, they're lazy. The other ones, they actually have physical conditions where they can't. Like I've got friends. Me and Fleek both have friends that are 100% total permanent unemployable. These guys, I don't even think they can hold down a job to save anything, and they're trying their best. They are, but because they went and they raised their hands, signed the contract, and they went out and they got blown up multiple times. I mean, I did. A lot of my friends did. It's just it's tough. It's a tough situation because you have some of the young people that don't want to do anything. You've got some of the young people that are coming back that are too messed up. They can't do anything. And then there's other guys that are just lost in the sauce because they need an officer or somebody in charge to, kick them in the butt.
Well, the difference between civilian life and military life is between a light switch turning on and off. There's no in between, because a lot of times when I left and came back in civilian life, people said all I knew how to do is kick the tires and light the fires pertaining to the jet. But I only had one fitness report for flight. The rest of it, how I handled the men. Okay? That's how your fitness report went. But at the same point, I do feel I'm not in the Army. I'm not in the Marines. I wasn't in combat where they saw that. I can't relate to that directly. But, my father was in World War II. My uncle lost his leg in Germany, not Germany, but Italy, in a landmine in World War II. They never talked about it, but they somehow came out of it. I don't know. My dad was an aircraft carrier. My brother was burned a little bit. And
you're right.
I don't know. I don't know. Most of the time.
No, you're right. That generation was a lot tougher than this generation nowadays. Mm-hmm. Yes, I definitely concur with that.
Well, I don't know if they were tougher. But they mentally realized that they didn't have anyone else to depend on. They had to do it themselves. They didn't have a very good VA. Okay. They didn't have a lot of it to really fall back on. And my nephew right now had just served 23 years in the Army. And he's all crippled up too. And it wasn't because he went and got his shoulder messed up and stuff like that. But it's a lot of different situations for different people. in different ones, but I'm hoping that there's enough people out there that can support them, like VA or other places that can help these young men and women have a full life.
Yes.
Yeah.
So, I have a couple more questions about the plane. How many landings on a carrier did you have?
Well, it's hard to tell. I mean, I've got my flight book right here with it. I probably have 200 or 300 traps during the day and a couple of hundred at nighttime with it, because you had 13 officers and Rios, and each one of them had to have so much flight time. The requirement was you couldn't go more than 5 days without a trap and then fly at night. You understand? In other words, you had to fly within 5 days of during a day. Therefore, you weren't allowed to fly at nighttime unless you had a day flight within 5 days. So they were very conscious about everyone keep board up in the ready room that had all the pilots on it. And if you got one or two behind everybody, they tried to make you catch up. The only problem is you only had so many airplanes. And one time I came out of Jacksonville, and my commanding officer at that time said, "Dwayne, I want you to fly." And I said, "I haven't flown in 5 days, you know." He says, "I don't care. We got airplanes up. You can take off during the day." I said, "What's that got to do me? I got to come back and it's nighttime and it's dark." Now you have to understand, in a clear night, I don't know if you guys understand this, flying at night, you have white stars above you and you got white lights around the ship and around you, because those are the lights the ships have on that escorting the carrier or anybody else fishing or transporting out there. You don't know what's upside down and right side up when you're flying at nighttime. Okay? So it's not unusual to get disoriented, so you better believe your instruments. So it's not easy to fly at night as people think. I was flying out of Cuba one time on a carrier, the America, and the E-2 vectored me to intercept an airplane coming out toward the ship from Cuba. So sure enough, I vectored toward it and got a single track target on it. See, I see it, and I see its afterburner on, but I don't see any lights on it. You know, the position lights, the green and red, or anti-collision lights. And I look out and I said, "That son of a gun sees me because I still have mine on." So immediately I turned mine off. But you don't think about that at nighttime because you're used to seeing it. Even when you're outside looking up and you see an airplane go over at nighttime, you see it's red and white or red and green lights on because they're position lights.
Yeah.
And here I'm going against a possible MiG coming out of Cuba, and I got all my lights on. I'm going, they didn't tell me to turn my lights off when I'm intercepting a pilot. So there's a lot of stuff going. Nighttime is not that interesting flying because there's not much you can see. But you still have to intercept. We still do missions out there intercepting. I intercepted bears. I've intercepted different Soviet airplanes. And it's sort of interesting to intercept them and give them the bird.
Yeah. Yes. So when you're like 400 or 500 miles away from the ship, and that ship is moving constantly, obviously, how do you find your way back to it?
Well, you got two things working for you. One, you know, in normal shipboard operation, the ship is moving, but it's not moving that much because the carriers I flew off were fossil burners. They weren't nuclear. So therefore, they didn't turn the burners up a little bit and get the hell out of Dodge. They just sort of loitered around with it. But you also had data link between the E-2, which most of the time, once you took off a carrier, 80% of the time, you weren't talking with the carrier. You were talking with the E-2. Okay.
Okay.
So they were the mission control. All right. And then they switched you over to the comm for the carrier, and the carrier will tell you where you're at. In other words, okay, take this bearing, come on in. This is where we're at, basically. Come back to the carrier. Your landing time is this time, so you can calculate at what speed you need to be above the carrier. Or if you're in a nighttime where you're stacked up every 1,000 feet in 1 mile, I may be back 15 miles at 15,000 feet, and they say you're pushing at 1,500. Let's say 2,200, which would be what, 10 o'clock at night. You have to be at that spot to push over. So you're doing these lazy eights or lazy racetrack. There'll be times where all of a sudden you're back here and you've got only 10 seconds to get 1.5 miles to your push time. You're in stage 5. Because if you're not there within that time frame of 5 to 10 seconds, then you're pushing everybody else above you further back. You follow me?
Yes, sir.
I have hit that push time doing 500 miles an hour. Okay. Because I didn't want the person behind me to have to, change their push time. So then you just pull back, hit the speed brakes, and try to slow up so you don't overtake the guy in front of you.
Yep.
No, it's
when
you really are taught.
Yeah. When you got out of the Navy, you said you were a Lieutenant JG?
No, Lieutenant Commander.
Oh, Lieutenant Commander.
I turned down Lieutenant. I was a lieutenant. I turned down Lieutenant Commander because if you accept it, you have to have 2 more years.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. I gotcha.
I wore the bars because they frocked you. They say, "Oh, you're on the selection board. You can wear the bars or the oak leaves."
Yeah.
But officially, you're not getting paid.
Yeah, of course. So when you got out of the Navy, what kind of career did you pick up?
Well, I had a family friend that had a business in California, in the Silicon Valley area. And he was a contractor, and I got to meet him and with him for about a couple of weeks when I went out to safety school in Monterey. And so I stayed at his house and went down to Monterey to do the safety school. And he had a contracting business, and I've always enjoyed construction. And he promised me to give me the same amount of money that I was making in the Navy if I wanted to leave. He can become a, worker for him. And that's when I really started to look at if I want to stay in or not. And I decided, okay, no, I'll go back and work with him. Unfortunately, he was the civilian side of it, thinking everything comes easy. And he ended up losing his job or losing his business, and I took it over. And within, like I tell people, if you want to work 18 to 20 hours a day, you can make anything happen. So within 2 years, I built it from a $600,000 to over $1 million a year job. So
Nice.
It was just because of me never seeing my family at night or during the day. My kids for 3 years didn't know I was even living at the house because I was gone before they got up for school, and I was back when they're in bed. But that's the price you have to pay to be a father and take care of your family.
Yes, sir. Well, excellent, man. So we appreciate you coming on. Before I let you go, I just have to ask you, what kind of advice would you give a young person going into the military today or coming out of the military?
Well, first of all, it's hard enough for these kids, especially with the economy the way it is financially. Most of the ones I'm still working at 76. I'll be 77 next month. And I'm still working, and I meet a lot of high school kids, or even kids in their 30s or stuff. They're all staying at home, 34, almost 40, still living with their parents.
Yeah.
Because they can't afford a home. They can't afford an apartment because if not, it'd be 3 guys to be able to help pay for it. If they want a career, go in the service. Absolutely. And decide what service you think you want. Army, Navy, Air Force, Coast Guard. I don't care. Or the reserves.
Right.
You're going to learn a trade. You never got out of high school. I don't care. There's nothing in high school you're going to take with you to the workforce. But if you go to the military, they're going to give you a trade. And they're going to teach you to be a man or a young woman, because they're both sides. If you're getting out of the service, and after 4 years and 2 left, either stay in the reserves so that you keep that comrade. It's hard, as you said, the Marines, you're such a close unit that you have buddies and friends. You develop such a strong unit together.
Yes.
So when you leave and go out in society, you've lost that unit. So if you get out, try to stay in some form of a unit like a reserve. So you have someone you can talk to. I say money is not important, but memories are. Well, your memories are the military during that time frame. So create those memories with other people that have similar memories or can tell you new memories about that. And then take your time and find something that you really want to, spend your time developing a skill and get into it. It doesn't have to be technical. There's a lot of schools out there, and there's a lot of other companies that will hire and teach you and pay you a fair rate. And, you'll get by, or go back to school and learn, because you got the GI Bill available.
Yes.
Don't
that is
come
true.
to me
The
and
GI
tell
Bill
me-
is very helpful, and the 9/11 GI Bill, the Montgomery and the regular one.
Yep.
Yeah. But there's
So-
options. The thing is, you just have to look for it.
Yeah. I think I try to talk all young people to join the military. My wife is the exact opposite. I say join the military. My wife's like, no, stay away. But it's a great. You get what you put into it. If you go in there with a bad attitude, you're not going to have a great time in the military. But go in there with a good attitude, do your thing. And I say, when you get out of the military, definitely 100% find American Legion or a VFW and get back to your kind of people, because when you come out of the military, the civilians kind of suck. I don't know of a nice way to put this, but a veteran and a civilian, they're just 2 totally different people. And most of my friends, they're veterans. I do have some civilian friends, but I am more close to my veteran friends than I am with civilian friends, only because they get me. But definitely find your tribe is what they say. So,
Well, I find that young people have too much interest in their cell phone and they're playing games on the computer to do any social contact. Where when I was younger, you'd walk into some place, within 5 minutes, you got 10 people talking to each other.
Right.
Wow.
So
That sounds familiar, Fleek.
unfortunate.
Like I go into a bar or a hall and I'd start talking to 1 million people.
Yeah.
Sorry, Dwayne, I got a gift for Gab.
He does have a gift for Gab.
No. Well, gentlemen, I'll be honest. Thank you for allowing me to convey some of my experience. I'll always be available for any other questions if it ever comes up. And
hey, thanks,
I will
Dwayne. It's been
that
an
on.
honor and a privilege, man.
Yes, definitely our privilege. We love sitting down and talking to veterans, man. Even though I work all day long and I'm always tired and I'm like, oh man, I have a podcast tonight. But as soon as that camera starts going and I start talking and engaging, I'm just like, oh my God, yes, I am so glad I didn't pass this one up. I love it.
No, it's fun. I wish that we had more ability or more. I wish I had more people, but a lot of times where you live at, there's certain times you don't want to talk military all the time, because there's other things going on in this world. But there's other times that, as I sit here and I don't have, people can't understand, what it's like to be a military veteran sometimes. And it's even though you're saying thank you for your service, I always say it's more than thank you. Thank you giving me the opportunity to serve my country.
Exactly. Yeah. That's what
I
would never
like that.
It was an honor. I mean, like I said, I wouldn't be who I am right now, which I don't know who I am right now, to be honest with you, but I wouldn't have the fortitude and the will to keep working and
correct.
Kick the heck out of my kids and make sure they're productive. So I'll get a hold of my wife, and sometime you'll have an opportunity to talk to her, because she really has quite an interesting story in her own way.
That would be awesome.
I would love to follow it up and get your wife on the following week. We'll do a back-to-back Turpin show.
A Turpin show. Oh, that's good.
Oh, that's good.
Good. I like a Turpin show. I like that.
Yeah, I'll shoot her an
keep-
email. Yeah, I would love to have her on.
Do that. She
Yeah,
was
it's always good.
She was an intelligence officer. She was an intelligence officer a while, and I said, "You weren't pretty smart. You weren't pretty smart marrying a goddamn pilot."
Oh, one last question before I let you go. UFOs. You ever see a UFO?
No.
Damn.
No, I haven't. I haven't. I mean, nothing in the sky that I haven't seen that I didn't understand.
Yeah. We had a U-2 pilot on about maybe a year ago.
Yeah.
So YouTube, for people that don't know, they actually fly north of, like, they're in space.
Oh, they're 60,000.
Yeah, they're like 60,000.
60,000 plus. Yes, sir. I asked him if he, I asked him if he ever saw any UFOs, and he just kind of smirked and said no. I'm like, come on, man, I see that smirk. He's still flying today.
Now the F-14 had a 50,000 foot ceiling.
How far?
So it's ceiling. No, the ceiling, how high they could fly.
Yeah.
They said they shouldn't go over 50,000 feet.
50.
Okay. Because the air density is so minimum up there that the engines would not function correctly.
Correct. Yes.
So every airplane has a ceiling. Every airplane has a ceiling.
Yes. Well, it was a pleasure talking to you. If you ever need anything, please give us a shout out.
Yeah, Dwayne.
You have my contact. Are you on Facebook?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna look you up. I'll send you a friend request. All right, excellent.
All right, do that. I'll see if I can honor it. Most of them I say bullshit because I don't know who they are.
Yeah,
if I get 20 requests, I'll say, I want to be your friend. I want to be your friend. I don't know who you are.
Yes. Yeah. I do the same thing, but except for I try to accept most people. You could tell when they're phonies, but right, most of the time. But I try to accept most people just because I'm trying to push our nonprofit and our podcast out there. So we'll see what happens. All right. Well, is there anything else you have before we let you go?
Well, the only thing is I want to thank you, Richard, especially, and I imagine other people are involved with it, for what you're doing for the veterans. I mean it. I would not, be honest with you, I would not be on here if I realized it was something that's putting a lot of money in your pocket.
Oh, yeah.
It's for the veterans. And that's the only reason I came on, because I really felt that you honestly are an honorable man and you do want to help the veterans.
Yes, thank you. I appreciate that. So just to let you know, when I first started this, I didn't have an idea of the nonprofit, but money started rolling in, and it kind of creeped me out, because it's not my goal to profit off of your guys' stories, right? So I thought, hey, what can I do what can I do with this? So I was like, hey, let's start a nonprofit. And I love sports, so why not send veterans and first responders to sporting events when we can?
Well, thank you for doing that, because it's one of the things that, believe it or not, it sounds funny, veterans are team players. And
Yes.
here you are sending them to a team sport.
Yes, sir.
And they can relate to team sport.
Yes.
You know, so that's you know, we're all a team.
Yeah.
I got a kick. Someone gave me a patch the other day. He says, I may not be something. It's next door. It was something like that. I may not be in the service now, but I was, and I can still kick your ass. It was like it was a cute one that says I can still kick your ass. You know, and it's like, you know, don't mess with a veteran.
That's
Correct.
right.
So.
Well, thanks, Rich. Thanks, Chaplain.
Hey, thanks, guys.
Yes, sir. And I will reach out to get your wife by in the next couple of days. Thank you. Thanks for everybody who. Thanks to everybody who's watching, listening out there. However you're getting on, watching, listening, we appreciate you. Chaps, thanks again.
Hey,
Turp, thank you, sir.
Nice job. Nice job, Turp. Nice job, Flake.
But if there's other people that want to come up and have a bunch more questions, I'll try to answer them, because the F-14 is not confidential anymore.
Yes.
Okay.
And it's really too bad that I'm glad that Top Gun was done so people could really see the airplane, you know, the movie. So that was a good one.
That was a good one. That was actually filmed on the aircraft carrier I was on when I was there, and two of my friends actually made the movie.
Yep.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, it was very cool. That's my claim to fame. I wasn't a pilot, but I got to see it firsthand. All right, guys, I won't keep you longer.
It takes, like it says, it takes a Navy, everybody aboard a carrier to make one pilot.
Yes, sir. Yes,
I couldn't fly an airplane without all the people.
That is
all right.
true.
Thank you, guys.
All right.
Thanks,
we're gonna
Dwayne.